I trusted him with my whole heart, until one suitcase, one lie, and one piece of jewelry shattered everything. What I found in his carry-on wasn't just betrayal, it was a secret that would change my life forever. Before we dive into this emotional journey, make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and turn on notifications. Stories like this one, they're why we're here, to inspire, to challenge, and to remind you that even in the darkest moments, there's light ahead. The last normal moment. The airport was a symphony of chaos, rolling suitcases, echoing announcements, the sharp scent of overpriced coffee. I tightened my grip on my carry-on, my nails digging into the handle. Daniel stood beside me, his phone pressed to his ear, nodding at whatever his client was saying. His free hand rested on the small of my back, warm and familiar. Or at least, it should have felt familiar. "Just a few days, babe," he murmured after hanging up, flashing me that easy smile, the one that used to make my stomach flip. Now it just made me uneasy. I forced a laugh. "You say that every time, and then it turns into a week." He leaned in, kissed my forehead. "Not this time. Promise." But his eyes flickered away too fast. Something was off. It wasn't just the trip. It was the way he'd packed in a hurry last night, the way he'd hesitated when I asked who else was going. The way he kept adjusting his wedding ring, like it was suddenly too tight. I swallowed the doubt. "You're overthinking this, Ava." Then my phone buzzed. A text from Lena. "Did you check his bag like I told you?" I glanced at Daniel's sleek black carry-on, resting at his feet. Lena had been joking, probably, when she'd said it last week. "Girl, if you really want to know, just peek in his suitcase next time he travels." We both laughed. But now the idea clawed at me. Daniel caught me staring. "What?" "Nothing." I tucked my phone away. "Just Lena being dramatic." He smirked. "So normal Lena." I should have let it go. But then he reached down to zip the side pocket of his bag, too carefully, and my pulse spiked. Before I could stop myself, I nudged his shoulder playfully. "You packed your toothbrush this time, right? Or am I going to get another midnight call about hotel toothpaste being gross?" He rolled his eyes. "Yes, Mom." I reached for his bag. "Let me check." His hand clamped over mine. "Hard. Don't." The word was sharp, a blade between us. I froze. His grip loosened immediately, his expression shifting to something softer. "I mean, come on. Don't make a scene." He laughed, but it was strained. "You know how I hate people digging through my stuff." The air between us thickened. Around us, the airport hummed. Families hugging, couples saying goodbye. Normal people with normal problems. And then a voice over the PA system. "Final boarding call for flight 217 to Chicago." Daniel exhaled, relieved. "That's me." He pulled me into a hug, his chin resting on my head. "Love you." I buried my face in his shoulder, breathing in the scent of his cologne. "This is fine. Everything is fine." But as he walked away, I watched the way his carry-on swayed at his side. Heavy. Too heavy for just a 3-day trip. And that's when I knew. I waited until he disappeared into the security line. Then I took out my phone and texted Lena. "I'm checking the bag." My hands shook as I reached for the zipper. And that's when I found it. The necklace. Not mine. Never mine. The unthinkable discovery. My fingers trembled as they brushed against the cool metal of the necklace, half buried beneath a stack of neatly folded dress shirts. For a second, I just stared at it, my brain refusing to process what I was seeing. It was delicate. A thin silver chain with a small teardrop pendant. Simple. Elegant. Not mine. I had never owned anything like it. I favored bold, chunky jewelry, statement pieces, the kind Lena always joked could double as self-defense weapons. This was something a woman with softer tastes would wear. A woman who didn't need to scream for attention. My throat tightened. I lifted the necklace, the pendant catching the harsh airport lights. That's when I saw the engraving. Tiny, almost hidden along the edge. To my always. E. The world tilted. E. Who the hell was E? I dug through the rest of the bag, my movements frantic now. Socks, a spare charger, a paperback thriller Daniel had been meaning to read. Normal things. Innocent things. And then there, tucked into the inner pocket, a receipt. The date was from 2 weeks ago. Silver Lining Jewelers. $285. Engraving, To my always. I nearly laughed. He hadn't even bothered to hide it well. A voice cut through the noise in my head. Ma'am, are you all right? I looked up. A flight attendant stood nearby, her brow furrowed. She had kind eyes, the type that made you want to spill your guts. My voice cracked. I clenched the necklace in my fist, the metal biting into my palm. Yeah, just drop something. Her gaze flicked to my hand, then to the necklace. Something shifted in her expression. Recognition. Discomfort. She took a step back. All right. Well, have a good flight. She hurried away, her heels clicking against the tile. That's when the pieces started clicking too. Daniel's business trips. The way he'd been distant lately. The new passcode on his phone. I pulled out my own phone, my fingers flying over the screen. Instagram. Daniel's profile. Following. I scrolled through the list, my heart hammering. There. Elena Martel. Her profile was private, but her picture, dark hair, sharp cheekbones, a smile that didn't reach her eyes, was enough. I clicked on her tagged photos. And there he was. Daniel, at some corporate dinner 6 months ago, his arms slung casually around her shoulders. Her wearing black. Him leaning in, whispering something that made her laugh. Intimate. I zoomed in. And that's when I saw it. Around her neck. The same damn teardrop pendant. My vision blurred. The airport noise faded into a dull roar. Daniel had bought her a necklace. He had engraved it. And he had packed it in his bag like it was nothing. Like I was nothing. I stood there, shaking, the necklace still clutched in my hand. Then, a text. From Daniel. Forgot my headphones in the car. Can you grab them before you leave? I stared at the message. Then at the necklace. Then at the gate where his plane was boarding. And I made a decision. I wasn't going home. I was going to find out who the hell he really was. The other woman. The parking garage was cold, the concrete walls echoing with the sound of my footsteps as I stormed toward my car. My hands were still shaking, the necklace now stuffed into my pocket like a dirty secret. I threw myself into the driver's seat and immediately pulled up Elena Martel's Instagram again. Private, of course, but there were other ways to find her. I opened LinkedIn and typed her name. Bingo! Her profile was polished, professional. Elena Martel, Senior Marketing Consultant, Hartford & Klein, the same firm Daniel had been working with for the past year. I tapped on the company page, scrolled through their team photos, and there they were. Together. Over and over. Daniel and Elena at a conference. Daniel and Elena at a charity gala. Daniel and Elena laughing at some rooftop bar, her fingers curled around a wine glass, his hand resting on the back of her chair. My stomach twisted. I switched to Facebook, searched her name. Her profile was locked down tight, but her cover photo was a beach sunset, and in the corner, a familiar wristwatch peeked into the frame. Daniel's watch. The one I'd given him for our anniversary. I slammed my phone onto the passenger seat and gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Breathe. Just breathe. A notification popped up on my screen. A DM request. The username was just a string of numbers. No profile pic. I almost ignored it. But then I read the preview. You deserve to know the truth. My thumb hovered over the message. This was stupid. It could be a scam. A troll. But what if it wasn't? I opened it. Unknown, you're Ava, right? Daniel's wife. I didn't respond. Unknown, I saw you at the airport. With the necklace. I know who it belongs to. I shot through my veins. Me, who are you? A pause. Then. Unknown, someone who knows Elena. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Unknown, she's not what you think. Before I could reply, another message came through. A photo. I tapped it, and my blood ran cold. It was Elena, but not the polished, smiling version from her profiles. This Elena had red-rimmed eyes, pale skin, a hospital bracelet on her wrist. The timestamp in the corner read 3 months ago. Unknown, she was sick, really sick, and Daniel knew. I stared at the photo, my mind racing. Sick? What did that mean? Me, what are you saying? The response came fast. Unknown, meet me. Today. I'll tell you everything. An address followed. A coffee shop downtown. I hesitated. This could be a trap. But then I looked at the necklace again. At the engraving. To my always. I typed back. Me. I'll be there in an hour. Then I shoved my phone into my pocket, started the car, and pulled out of the parking garage. The sky had darkened, thick clouds rolling in. A storm was coming, and I was about to walk right into the middle of it. The confrontation. Rain pounded against the windshield as I pulled up to the coffee shop, a small indie place with fogged-up windows and a flickering neon sign. My hands hadn't stopped shaking since I left the airport. The necklace felt like a lead weight in my pocket. I checked my phone one last time. No new messages. Just the address glaring back at me and the photo of Elena, her hollow eyes seared into my memory. She was sick, and Daniel knew. The bell above the door jingled as I stepped inside. The smell of espresso and cinnamon wrapped around me, too warm, too sweet. My eyes scanned the room, landing on a woman sitting alone in the corner. She looked up. Our eyes locked. She was younger than I expected, maybe mid-20s, with choppy blonde hair and a nose ring. Her fingers drummed nervously against her coffee cup. I walked over. "You're Ava," she said. Not a question. I didn't sit down. "Who are you?" "Jenna." She swallowed hard. "Elena's sister." The air left my lungs. I slid into the chair across from her, my legs unsteady. "You sent the photo." She nodded. For a second, neither of us spoke. The coffee machine hissed in the background. Someone laughed too loud at the counter. Then Jenna reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She pushed it toward me. I opened it. Medical records. Elena Martel. Diagnosis, stage 4 ovarian cancer. The date was from 4 months ago. My vision blurred. "I don't understand." Jenna's voice was quiet. She didn't want anyone to know. Not even most of her friends. "But your husband?" She trailed off. I clenched my fists under the table. "What about him?" Jenna looked away. "He knew. Almost from the start." The words hit like a punch. Daniel knew. He knew, and he never told me. He knew, and he bought her a damn necklace. I forced myself to breathe. "Were they?" I couldn't finish the sentence. Jenna hesitated. "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like?" My voice cracked. She twisted her napkin. "Elena didn't have a lot of people. Our parents are gone." She threw herself into work. "Daniel was—" A pause. "He was there for her." Something ugly twisted in my chest. "So he was her shoulder to cry on? Is that what you're saying?" Jenna met my eyes. "I'm saying he promised to take care of her. Right up until the end." The end. A chill crawled down my spine. "Is she?" Jenna's face crumpled. 3 weeks ago." The room spun. Elena was dead, and Daniel had been with her. While I was at home, wondering why he seemed distant. While I made excuses for his late nights. While I trusted him. I pulled the necklace from my pocket and slammed it onto the table. Then why did he have this? Why was it in his bag today? Jenna went still. Her fingers trembled as she reached for it, turned the pendant over. And that's when I saw it. Tiny, etched into the silver on the back, a date. 2 days from now. Jenna's breath caught. This wasn't supposed to leave the house. "What?" She looked up, tears in her eyes. "Today's her birthday." The words hung between us, heavy and suffocating. Daniel hadn't packed the necklace for a trip. He'd packed it for a grave. And suddenly, I knew exactly where he was really going. I stood so fast my chair screeched. Jenna grabbed my wrist. "Ava, wait!" But I was already pulling out my phone, pulling up Daniel's location. The map loaded. A blue tick pulsed over a cemetery 2 states away. My husband wasn't on a business trip. He was at his mistress's grave, and I was going to catch him there. The hidden truth. The highway stretched endlessly before me, rain slashing against the windshield in relentless waves. My GPS estimated another hour until I reached Pine Grove Cemetery, but every minute felt like an eternity. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, replaying Jenna's words in my head. He promised to take care of her, right up until the end. What did that even mean? Financial support? Emotional affairs? Something worse? My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. Daniel again. "Hey, just landed. Meetings all afternoon, but I'll call you tonight. Love you." A lie. Every word of it. I didn't respond. Instead, I dialed Lena. She picked up on the first ring. "Tell me you're not actually following him," she said, voice sharp with worry. I need you to look something up. I kept my eyes on the road. Elena Martel. Died 3 weeks ago. Ovarian cancer. A pause. Then the sound of rapid typing. Okay. Yeah, I see her obituary. It mentions a private memorial service next week. Why? Next week. My stomach dropped. Are you sure? Positive. It's right here. Family and close friends only at some chapel inn. Then why is Daniel at her grave today? Silence. Then, slowly, Lena said, Ava, what exactly are you planning to do when you get there? I didn't have an answer. Because the truth was I didn't know. All I knew was that the man I'd married had an entire secret life, one that involved hospital visits and engraved jewelry and midnight vigils at a dead woman's grave. And I needed to understand why. The cemetery gates loomed ahead, wrought iron and imposing. The rain had tapered off, leaving the air thick with the scent of wet earth and decaying leaves. I parked haphazardly and grabbed the necklace from my console, my only proof, my only weapon. Then I stepped out into the quiet. Pine Grove was older, the kind of place with crumbling headstones and moss-covered angels. The kind of place that felt forgotten. My phone showed Daniel's location deep in the property. I followed the winding path, my sneakers sinking into damp grass. Then movement. A figure in the distance, kneeling before a fresh grave. Daniel. His back was to me, shoulders hunched. Even from here, I could see the tension in his frame. I moved closer, heart hammering. And that's when I heard it. His voice raw and broken. I'm sorry, Ellie. I should have been there. Ellie. Not Elena. Ellie. Like it was a name he'd spoken 1,000 times. I froze, suddenly unsure. This wasn't the Daniel I knew, the confident, composed man who gave boardroom presentations and charmed my parents. This was someone shattered, someone grieving. I took a step back. A twig snapped underfoot. Daniel whirled around. For one terrible second, we just stared at each other. His face was streaked with tears, and in his hands, a single white lily, the same flower he'd brought me on our first date. His mouth opened, closed. Ava, he finally whispered. How did you? I pulled the necklace from my pocket, letting it dangle between us. You want to explain this? His expression crumbled. And then, the truth came spilling out. Not an affair. Something worse. Elena wasn't his lover. She was his daughter. The daughter. The world stopped. His daughter. The words hung between us, too enormous to comprehend. The necklace slipped from my fingers, landing soundlessly on the damp grass. Daniel didn't move to pick it up. He just stared at me with red-rimmed eyes, the lily trembling in his grip. You have a daughter? My voice didn't sound like my own. He swallowed hard. Had. The past tense punched through me. Elena, Ellie was gone. Had been gone for weeks. And I never even knew she existed. The ground felt unsteady beneath me. I stumbled back, my legs hitting a nearby bench. I sank onto it, the cold stone seeping through my jeans. Daniel didn't approach. He just stood there by the grave, looking as broken as I felt. How? The word clawed its way out of my throat. He ran a hand over his face. College. My sophomore year. Her mother, his voice cracked. She didn't want me involved. Signed away my rights before Ellie was even born. The math clicked instantly. Elena was in her late 20s. Daniel was 43. It fit. All those business trips. The late nights. The secrecy. He wasn't cheating. He was being a father. A father to a dying girl. Why didn't you tell me? My hands fisted in my lap. Daniel finally moved then, sinking to his knees in front of me. I wanted to. God, Ava, I wanted to. But her mother made me sign an NDA. If I told anyone, even you, she would have cut me out completely. His tears fell freely now, splashing against the weathered stone path. I only reconnected with Ellie 2 years ago. She tracked me down after her mom passed. By then, she was already sick. The pieces were falling into place, but the picture they formed was too painful to look at. All those times I'd accused him of being distant, of working too much. He wasn't pulling away from me. He was watching his child die. I pressed my palms to my eyes, trying to stem the flood of guilt and grief threatening to drown me. Daniel reached for me, then hesitated. The necklace. It was her birthday present. I bought it right after her diagnosis. I never got to give it to her. His voice broke on the last word. Something inside me shattered with it. I looked past him to the headstone. Simple. Unadorned. Asterisk Elena Martel. Beloved daughter. 1996-2023 asterisk. No mention of him. No hint that she'd ever known her father. The injustice of it burned through me. I stood abruptly, my body moving before my mind could catch up. I walked to the grave, picked up the discarded necklace, and knelt beside the freshly turned earth. Then I pressed the pendant to my lips, and I buried it with her. Daniel made a wounded noise behind me. When I turned, his face was a mask of agony and gratitude. I didn't know if I could forgive him for the lies. But in that moment, I finally understood the truth. The real betrayal wasn't his secrecy. It was that he'd shouldered this grief alone. And as the first true sob racked his body, I did the only thing I could. I pulled my husband into my arms. And together, for the first time, we mourned. The aftermath. The drive home was silent. Rain streaked the windshield again, blurring the world outside into watery shapes. Daniel sat slumped in the passenger seat, staring at his hands. The same hands that had dug into the earth to bury his daughter's necklace. The same hands that had held mine at our wedding. I didn't know what to say. Every time I opened my mouth, the words dissolved before they could take shape. How could you keep this from me? Why didn't you trust me? Who else knew? But the questions felt hollow now. Pointless. Because the truth was I understood. Not the lying, that still cut deep, but the desperation behind it. The fear of losing the only connection he had left to his child. My fingers tightened on the wheel. Daniel finally spoke as we turned onto our street. Jenna called me. My stomach dropped. When? While you were driving. His voice was raw. She thought you had a right to know everything. The streetlights cast jagged shadows across his face as we pulled into the driveway. Our house loomed ahead, dark and unfamiliar despite the years we'd spent inside it. I killed the engine. The quiet was suffocating. Daniel didn't move. She sent me the photos. From the hospital. I closed my eyes. Ellie wanted to meet you, he whispered. The words hit like a physical blow. She asked me 12 times. His breath shuddered. But I was scared. Scared her mother's lawyers would find out. Scared you'd, he broke off. I knew what he couldn't say. Scared you'd leave. I turned to face him fully. I need to see them. His brow furrowed. The photos, Daniel. For a second, I thought he'd refuse. Then, wordlessly, he unlocked his phone and handed it to me. The screen glowed to life, a hospital room. And there she was, Elena, Ellie, propped up in bed, her dark hair thin from treatment, her skin pale against the sterile white sheets. But her smile, God, her smile was pure Daniel. The same crinkles at the corners of her eyes. The same dimple in her left cheek. My throat closed. I swiped to the next image. Daniel sitting beside her, gripping her hand like he could somehow transfer his own strength into her body through touch alone. Another swipe. Ellie laughing at something off camera, a notebook open in her lap. My fingers hovered over the page. What's that? Daniel's voice was thick. Letters. For everyone she was leaving behind, including one with my name on it. I nearly dropped the phone. Daniel reached over, zooming in on the stack of envelopes beside her. Sure enough, there it was. Neat, looping script. Ava, you never got it because... He swallowed hard. Because I couldn't bring myself to read what she wrote to you. The admission hung between us, heavy with unspoken fear. That Ellie had told me something he wasn't ready for me to know. That her words would change everything. I handed the phone back, my hand steady despite the storm inside me. Where is it now? Safe. He hesitated. Do you want? Yes. The word came out sharper than I intended. Daniel flinched but nodded. Okay. We sat there in the dark car, the only sound the rain pattering against the roof. Then quietly he said, I'm sorry, Ava. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. I reached across the console and took his hand. And for the first time since the airport, we walked into the house together. The letter. The envelope sat between us on the kitchen table, pristine and damning. Daniel had retrieved it from his locked filing cabinet, the one I'd never questioned, assuming it held tax documents or client contracts. Not secrets. Not a dead girl's last words to me. I traced the edge of the paper with one finger. Ellie's handwriting was neater than I expected, the ink slightly smudged in one corner as if she'd written this in a hurry. Or through pain. Daniel hadn't touched it since setting it down. He stood at the sink now, gripping the counter like it was the only thing keeping him upright. "You don't have to read it now," he said hoarsely. I ignored him and slid my thumb under the flap. The paper inside was thicker than standard stationery, the kind artists use for sketching. When I unfolded it, a smaller Polaroid photo fluttered onto the table. Ellie in a sunlit hospital courtyard, wrapped in an oversized cardigan, grinning at whoever held the camera. Daniel, probably. Her cheeks were hollowed from treatment, but her eyes, dark brown like his, were alight with quiet amusement. The letter itself was brief. "Dear Ava, if you're reading this, it means two things. 1, I lost the fight, and 2, my dad finally worked up the courage to be honest with you. Be gentle with him. He's terrible at feelings." A wet laugh escaped me. Daniel turned, his expression raw with hope and fear. I kept reading. "I asked to meet you a dozen times, but he always said no. Not because he didn't want us to know each other, because he was terrified you'd look at him differently after learning about me. The thing is, he worships you. The way he talks about your laugh, the way you bite your lip when you're concentrating, how you still get starstruck meeting his colleagues after all these years. It made me glad he had you, especially once I got sick." The words blurred. I swiped at my eyes with the back of my hand. "I'm not writing to apologize for existing or for complicating your marriage. I'm writing to thank you. For loving him through his worst moods, for being his safe place when watching me die became too much. And to ask you to keep loving him after I'm gone. P.S. The necklace was his idea, but the engraving was mine. Corny, right?" The last line was scribbled hastily, as an afterthought. "Tell him it's okay to cry now." The paper crumpled in my grip. Across the room, Daniel made a wounded sound. "Ava!" I stood so fast my chair toppled over. 3 strides, and I was across the kitchen, pulling him into me, his face buried against my shoulder as his body shook. All those nights he'd come home late, smelling of antiseptic and grief. The way he'd flinch when hospitals came up on TV. The business trips that were really bedside vigils. He'd been drowning right in front of me, and I hadn't even noticed. His tears soaked through my shirt. "I'm sorry," he choked out. "I'm so sorry." I tightened my hold. "I know." We stayed like that until the room grew dark around us, until his breathing evened out against my collarbone. When I finally pulled back, his eyes were red-rimmed but clearer than I'd seen them in months. "There's more," he said quietly. I braced myself. "How much more?" He reached into his pocket and slid a small key across the counter. "Enough that you might hate me after." The key was cold in my palm. "What's this for?" "Storage Unit 214. His throat worked. Ellie's things. Everything her mother left behind. The air left my lungs. This wasn't just about the past. It was about all the lies still between us. I closed my fingers around the key. "Take me there." Storage Unit 214. The storage facility was nearly empty at this hour, the long rows of metal doors glowing orange under the industrial lights. Unit 214 sat at the far end, its lock shiny and new compared to the rusted ones surrounding it. Daniel hesitated before sliding the key into the lock. "You should know, her mother wasn't just some college fling." I held my breath as the latch clicked open. The door rolled up with a metallic shutter, revealing a space far larger than I expected. Not just boxes, furniture, a velvet armchair, a mahogany bookshelf stacked with photo albums, and in the center, an antique trunk with peeling travel stickers. Paris, Rome, Mumbai. Daniel's fingers brushed the trunk's lid. Her name was Clara Martel. We were engaged. The ground tilted beneath me. Engaged. Not a one-night stand. Not a casual mistake. A life he'd planned. He lifted the lid. Inside were stacks of letters tied with ribbon, a porcelain music box, and a framed photo of a stunning dark-haired woman holding a baby, Ellie, with the same mischievous smile she'd inherited from Daniel. "I was 20 when we met at Oxford," he said softly. "She was a law student from Barcelona. Brilliant. Fierce. We got engaged 6 months later. The pieces refused to fit. But we met when you were 25. You told me you'd never. I lied." The words hung between us, stark and unpretty. Clara was pregnant when she left. Said she didn't want a family holding her back from her career. I didn't even know Ellie existed until she tracked me down at 35. The math punched me in the gut. 15 years. 15 years of his daughter living without him, thinking he'd abandoned her. I reached for the nearest photo album. The pages crackled as I turned them. Ellie is a gap-toothed child in a Barcelona football jersey. Ellie graduating high school, her mother's proud arm around her shoulders. Ellie standing alone at Clara's graveside, no father there to hold her up. Every image was a knife twist. Daniel sank onto the armchair, its springs groaning. When Ellie found me, she didn't want money or apologies. His voice broke. She wanted medical history. The cancer was already stage 3 by then. I clutched the album tighter. All those business trips, clinical trials, experimental treatments. He rubbed his temples. I paid for everything, but the one thing that could have saved her, a bone marrow transplant. A sob ripped from him. I knew before he finished. You weren't a match. He shook his head violently. Neither was anyone else. Her mother's family refused to even get tested. The cruelty of it stole my breath. For the first time, I saw the full scope of his grief, not just losing Ellie but failing her. Twice. First by never knowing her, then by being powerless to save her. I set the album down and crossed to him, kneeling beside the chair. His hands were ice cold when I took them. You should have told me. His laugh was hollow. And risk you looking at me like this? Like what? Like my heart was breaking for him. Like I finally understood the shadows behind his eyes. I reached into the trunk and pulled out the music box. The melody that tinkled out was familiar, the same lullaby Daniel sometimes hummed in his sleep. Ellie's song. His breath hitched. I closed the lid gently. Take it home. His eyes flew to mine. You mean? I mean we're not leaving her things in a storage unit. I stood, brushing dust from my knees. She's your daughter. That makes her part of our family. The hope in his expression was almost too much to bear. I extended a hand. Come on. Let's start with the photo albums. For the first time since the airport, since the necklace, since everything, Daniel smiled. And together, we began packing up the past. The empty chair. We placed Ellie's music box on the mantel. It looked strange there at first, this delicate, foreign object nestled between our wedding photos and the pottery vase my mother had gifted us. Like a puzzle piece from the wrong box. Daniel hovered nearby, arms crossed, as if waiting for me to change my mind. I didn't. Instead, I opened the lid. The melody, some Spanish lullaby Clara must have sung to Ellie, filled the living room. Daniel's shoulders tensed, then slowly relaxed. I used to play this for her during chemo, he said quietly. I didn't ask if it helped. The dark circles under his eyes answered that. We spent the rest of the evening unpacking the storage unit boxes. Ellie's favorite books, Jane Austen, annotated aggressively in the margins. Her sketch pads, watercolor landscapes, surprisingly good. A box of letters Clara had saved from Daniel during their engagement, still sealed, the stamps dated months after Ellie's birth. He stared at them like they might bite. I didn't know she kept these. I handed him a letter opener. Now's your chance to find out what you wrote. His laugh was shaky. I was 20 and heartbroken. It's probably embarrassing. But he opened them anyway. And with each page, another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. The young Daniel in these letters was someone I barely recognized, desperate, pleading, promising to follow Clara anywhere if she'd just let him be a father. Tell the baby I exist, one line read. Even if you never let me see her, please don't let her think she wasn't wanted. Daniel set the page down carefully, his fingers trembling. She never told her. The realization hit us both at once. Ellie grew up believing her father had abandoned her. And by the time she learned the truth, it was almost too late. I reached for his hand. You showed up when it mattered. Did it? The question hung unspoken between us. Would it have mattered more if he'd fought harder? If he'd hired lawyers, crossed borders, demanded his rights? Or would that have just made Ellie's last years a custody battle instead of whatever fragile peace they'd managed to build? There were no good answers. Only grief and the terrible weight of what if. The last box held Ellie's clothes, soft sweaters, a Barcelona FC scarf, a single high-heeled boot. Why only one? Daniel lifted a faded Yale hoodie to his face, breathing in deeply before folding it with military precision. Should we? I hesitated. Do you want to keep any of these? He shook his head. Not like this. Not as relics. Not as ghosts. I understood. We packed most of it for donation, save for a few pieces. The scarf, a pair of dangly earrings, the hoodie. Things that felt like her. By midnight, the house was full of Ellie. Her books on our shelves. Her art on the fridge. Her music box, still playing that same lullaby on loop. Daniel stood in the doorway of our guest room, now half storage, half shrine, and exhaled shakily. It's not enough. It wasn't. No amount of boxes or letters or keepsakes could fill the hole she'd left. But it was a start. I slipped my hand into his. We'll make space. For her memory. For his grief. For the truth, however heavy. And for the first time since the airport, it felt like we might actually survive this. The first Christmas without her. Snow fell in soft, silent ways outside our living room window, the first white Christmas in years. The tree we decorated just last night glittered with lights, but the air inside felt heavy, like the whole house was holding its breath. Daniel sat on the couch, staring at a small, clumsily wrapped present he'd pulled from the depths of Ellie's boxes. The tag read, "For Dad. Open when you miss me most." Neither of us had slept much. I could see it in the way his fingers trembled as he turned the gift over, in the way he kept glancing at the empty chair we'd both unconsciously avoided putting anything on, as if leaving space for someone who would never come. "You should open it," I said softly. He shook his head. "Not yet." But his thumb traced the edges of the wrapping paper like it was something sacred. I didn't push. Instead, I reached for the photo album we'd made last week, pages filled with every picture of Ellie we could find. Daniel teaching her to drive in an empty parking lot. Ellie laughing as she beat him at chess. The two of them asleep in hospital chairs, her head on his shoulder, his hand still clutching hers even in sleep. I turned to a new page and slid in the Polaroid from her letter. Ellie grinning in that sunlit courtyard. The photo curled slightly at the edges, already worn from how often we'd looked at it. Daniel exhaled sharply. She hated hospitals, always snuck outside to sketch whenever the nurses weren't looking. His voice was rough with the memory. I thought of the storage unit, of the dozens of sketchbooks filled with trees and skies and open windows. Escape routes, maybe, or just proof that beauty still existed. The music box played its familiar lullaby from the mantel. And then a knock at the door. Daniel stiffened. We weren't expecting anyone. I opened it to find Jenna shivering on our porch, her nose red from the cold, a bakery box in her hands. "Merry Christmas!" Behind me, Daniel stood so fast he nearly tripped. Jenna's eyes flicked past me to him, then back. "Ellie always made panettone. I thought maybe you should have some." The box in her hands was tied with a red ribbon, the same way Ellie's letters had been. Daniel made a sound like he'd been punched. I stepped aside. "Come in." Jenna hesitated, snow melting in her blonde hair. "I don't want to intrude." "You're not," Daniel said, his voice cracking. And just like that, our quiet, grieving Christmas wasn't so quiet anymore. Jenna brought stories with her, ones Daniel had never heard. Ellie at 6, stubbornly teaching herself to ride a bike without training wheels. Ellie at 16, sneaking out to see concerts in Barcelona. Ellie the night before her first chemo, cutting her long hair off herself so the cancer wouldn't take it from her. With each one, the empty chair felt less like a hole and more like a presence. Eventually, Jenna nodded to the unopened gift still clutched in Daniel's hands. "Are you going to open that or just keep staring at it?" He let out a wet laugh. "I don't know if I can." But he did. The paper gave way to a small wooden frame. Inside was a charcoal sketch. Daniel, asleep in one of those awful hospital chairs, his face lined with exhaustion but peaceful. At the bottom, in Ellie's messy scrawl, "This is how I'll remember you." Not sad. Just there. Jenna started crying first. Then Daniel. Then me. And for the first time since we'd buried that necklace in the cold earth, it didn't feel like we were mourning. It felt like we were remembering. The music box played on. Outside, the snow kept falling. And in the space between grief and love, we found our way forward. The first day after. New Year's, morning dawned bright and clear. The snow from Christmas melted into glittering puddles on the sidewalk. I stood at the kitchen window, watching sunlight catch in the steam rising from my coffee cup. Behind me, Daniel rummaged through the fridge for orange juice, his movements easier than they'd been in months. The music box sat silent on the mantel. For the first time since we'd brought it home, neither of us had wound it last night. Daniel nudged me with his elbow as he joined me at the window, pressing a cold glass of juice into my hand. "You're thinking too loud." I leaned into him, just wondering what happens now. The past weeks had been a whirlwind of grief and revelations, airports and graveyards and storage units full of ghosts. But today was blank. A new year, a fresh page. Daniel studied our reflection in the window glass. His stubble, my messy bun, the dark circles under both our eyes that were finally starting to fade. "Now we live," he said simply, as if it were that easy, as if it weren't the hardest thing either of us had ever done. The doorbell rang. Jenna stood on our porch again, this time holding 2 bulging tote bags. "Happy almost New Year. I brought brunch." She eyed Daniel's ratty college sweatshirt, and a fashion intervention. Daniel flipped her off, but held the door open wider. We ate pancakes at the dining table, the one we'd barely used since Ellie died, with Ellie's sketchbook open between us. Jenna pointed out her favorite drawings between bites of syrup-drenched bacon, laughing when Daniel admitted he'd never understood his daughter's obsession with drawing weirdly symmetrical trees. She was terrible at landscapes, Jenna agreed. Portraits were her thing. "Did she ever show you the one she did of?" She stopped abruptly, her fork hovering midair. Daniel didn't flinch. "Of who?" Jenna hesitated, then reached for her phone. A few taps, and she turned the screen toward us, a stunning charcoal portrait of a beautiful, fierce-eyed woman. "Clara." Daniel's breath hitched, just slightly. "When did she do this?" "Last summer." Jenna zoomed in on the corner where Ellie had scribbled Mom, if I remember her right. The air in the room changed. Not with sadness, but with something quieter. Acceptance, maybe. Daniel traced the edge of the phone screen. She got her nose perfect. And just like that, Clara was no longer a ghost or a villain or a secret. She was just a woman, flawed, complicated, loved. Jenna left after brunch, but not before tacking a new photo to our fridge, one none of us had seen before. Ellie and Daniel at Coney Island, their faces flushed from riding the cyclone, cotton candy stuck to Ellie's sweater. "Found it in her cloud storage," Jenna said. "Thought you should have it." After she left, Daniel stood staring at the photo for a long time. Then, without a word, he reached up and wound the music box. The lullaby filled the house once more. I pressed against his side as the last note played. "We're going to be okay." It wasn't a question. Daniel kissed my forehead. "We already are." Outside, the world kept turning. Cars honked. Kids laughed. Life moved forward, carrying us with it. And for the first time in a long time, that didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like hope. If this story resonated with you, let us know in the comments. And remember, grief isn't the end of love. It's just love with nowhere to go. So find somewhere. Share this with someone who needs it today, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about life, loss, and the unexpected ways we heal.